All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So to start off with, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, especially during your lunch hour. We really appreciate it. My name is Jade Quintanilla. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm going to be your host for today's discussion. And on behalf of everyone a part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for Staff Senate, along with Staff Senate as a whole, we are so grateful and thrilled that you are here today for our very first Red Talk discussion. For some of those of you who may not know, the Red Talk series is Raiders Engaged in Diversity. Uh, this is going to be a discussion series where we are going to be meeting with staff members across the university to discuss about different diversity topics regarding everything that has to do with diversity. Hopefully, I mean, who can always get everything that regards to diversity, but we're going to try, and we're looking forward to bringing this to all of you. For today's discussion, we're going to kick it off with kind of a simple question, but one that is very important and that we are excited to start with. And we have four amazing panelists who are going to be here to give us some insight to help start this dialogue off. And that question is, what is diversity? So before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and start with introductions of the panelists. So I'm going to start with Jade. Go ahead, Jade.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jake, and the rest of Staff Senate for creating this space for us. Before I introduce myself, I do want to acknowledge the land in which we occupy today and gather at Texas Tech and Lubbock and the surrounding region. We are occupied unceded territory of the Comanche and Mescalero Apache peoples. I recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land, and we owe the existence and vitality of our community to generations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color around the world who have given their hopes, dreams, and energy to the history which led us to this moment. Some brought here against their will, some left their homes in search of a better life, and some have lived on this land for countless generations. So I do want to acknowledge that in the space that we occupy today. I am Jade Silva Tovar. I'm the Senior Director in the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And for me, I am a first generation college student, professional, chingona. And those of you that don't speak Spanish, it essentially is a bad A woman. And that's how I really center my work in advocating for students. I'm originally from Iowa, so Midwest, and I'm honored to be here today, and everything I do is centered in equity and justice.
Thank you, Jade, and thank you for bringing that up. That's such a very important topic and important point, so thank you so much for that. Next, we're going to go to Cory. Cory, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cory Powell. It's a pleasure to be with you. I am the director within the Office of Institutional Diversity. My primary work is working with our community and connecting Lubbock to tech. Particularly in regards to the diversity work that we do here at the university and within the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm an alumnus of the university, originate from the great city of Victoria, Texas. That's where I was born, but I claim San Antonio as home because that's where I spent the majority of my formative years, and honored to have the opportunity to share with you on this afternoon.
Thank you, Cory. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Larry. Larry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks everybody. Hi, my name is Larry Phillippe. I'm the Disability Services Director here at Texas Tech. I oversee the Student Disability Services Office as well as the Technique Center, but I also serve in the role of the Campus ADA Coordinator. So my approach to diversity is through the disability lens, understanding, helping people understand that the disability population is probably one of the most diverse groups we have on campus. And so including them in that discussion is very important. So that's the approach that I will be coming from today.
Thank you, Larry. I know that I'm excited to hear more about that. And so we're glad to have you. Aaron, let's go to you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today. My name's Aaron Smith. I'm the managing director over here in services over in the operations division. As you know, the operations division is one of the largest departments, if you will, on campus. We're kind of the folks behind the scenes. The operations division, think of Lubbock. Think of Tech as a city within the city, and we handle those day-to-day operations that really make things kind of work here. And obviously, we have a very diverse group of folks over here, what I am in charge of mostly is custodial. You'll see custodial in the E&G buildings, probably about 100 of those folks and about 30 temps. In addition to that, I'm over the ARO office, which is almost like an in-house human resource department here over at the operations division. And in addition to that, I help with compliance and just a whole bunch of other issues that may come up. So anyway, just a pleasure to be here. I'm relatively new to Tech. I've been here about 18 months now. Prior to this, I served as a city manager and economic development director and multiple communities throughout Nebraska and the state of Texas. I too graduated from Texas Tech back in 2001. I finished up with my master's here, and it's basically having come full circle, if you will. So it's great to be back here in Lubbock. Thank you.
Well, I know Texas Tech is glad to have you back, and yes, thank you and your department for all that you do. You definitely help keep this campus running, and I know that I'm very grateful for that, especially during these times. So thank you, and thank you for being here. Real quick, just to recap, my name is Jake. I'm your host for today's discussion. I'm the academic advisor for public relations, and I am just excited to get to have this discussion with our awesome panelists. And let's just jump right into it. So the question that we're all here for is, what is diversity? You all kind of talked about it a little bit in your introduction, but I would like to hear what diversity means to you. It could be either the definition of diversity or your own personal outlook on it, or what you see in your day-to-day career about it. So whoever wants to go first, I'm gonna let y'all go ahead.
I can go first. I think for me, it's really looking at, diversity is the varying thoughts and perspectives. It is the varying cultures and backgrounds that encompass where folks come from. It is a community diversity, and so what is culture is part of that work. It's our own experiences, and how does that shape how we view the world and the perspectives that we have, and that continued outlook on life, and how are you gaining more knowledge and experiences. And so for me, with diversity, just alone, it's really that encompassing of diversity in thoughts, perspectives, people's cultures, and how you view the world. And so very broadly, that is how I view diversity.
Yeah, that's good. I'll jump in and follow that. It's a great way to describe it. For me personally, I approach the idea of diversity as something that's different than myself. I come from one of the probably least diverse groups in our population of the white male, but I consider myself very diverse from that group, and that I'm a male with a disability. And even more so, I'm a male with a hidden disability. And so I think for me, the definition of diversity is understanding perspectives that are not my own, and understanding perspectives that come from a different lifestyle, a different viewpoint than my own, that help me understand things to be more empathetic in what I do. And that's why I think it's so critical. But that's sort of my approach to it, is from this perspective.
I'll jump in there if that's all right, Jake. Hey, thank you all very much. For me, I'm kind of like you, Larry, in that I might not be considered as diverse as other, and I think that kind of goes into the biases that I think we all have And I think there's a recognition of that, and I certainly do recognize those. I understand that I am not like everybody that I work with. I'm certainly not like everybody that is in this organization that I serve on a daily basis, but that recognition is very important, and being open to that, I think, is very important. You know, for me, I did some research on this. You know, my degree is in public administration, and what was so refreshing is to see how that definition and what diversity is has changed since I graduated in 2001 with my master's degree. You know, before, what we used to talk about was those simple things that you could identify. What is diversity? Well, ethnic, gender, religion, simple things. We had this idea of this melting pot, right, where we all just kind of come together and we meld ourselves into this mold. And we're throwing that off finally, right? Because we're finally saying, hey, you know, if we all are put into this melting pot and we all look the same when it's all, if we all act the same when it's done, then we've done our job. Well, that's not the case anymore. So what we're doing now is we're saying that as opposed to just allowing folks into our organization, now we're allowing our differences to permeate, and that's fantastic, and that's diversity, in my opinion. But the best definition I came across, and I like it, was a collective mixture of human differences and similarities. In a simple term, I think that's what it is. And I think, and again, understanding where I'm coming from, and that my past and how I got here isn't like everybody else's. So then what we have to do is understand that we're going to develop basically the ability to interact with all these individuals in a way that I think is beneficial to Texas Tech and to all the folks we work with.
I would just say ditto to everything that's been said. For me, diversity really describes the many differences that exist amongst people that transcends gender and ethnicity, which is what we typically focus on, but it's all of the various things that collectively make us who we are. It's our preferences, it's our fears apart. You know, we're all complex creatures, and so diversity really is the richness that each of us brings to the human experience. I think individually we can be siloed, but collectively we can embrace and experience something so much greater. And so it's kind of the smorgasbord of life, right? You can grab a little of this and grab a little of that. And I think even within this conversation, just within this panel, we could spend hours talking about the ways that we are diverse without talking about gender, without talking about ethnicity, you know, the type of music we enjoy, the type of foods we enjoy, what we do for fun, and how we relieve stress, and how we approach academic and psychological issues. All of those things really makes us who we are. So I think it is a collection of what makes you great.
I love how you ended that, Cory, about it's a collection of what makes you great. And that's definitely the case. I mean, everyone comes with their own backgrounds and history, and that's always a great, unique experience to be a part of. You all touched on about how diversity is so many things. Like everything you said, I agree with. And it includes so many people. I feel like before, diversity was very, when people would hear it, they thought just one group of people, people of color, people's different sexual orientation, things like that. So my next question for y'all is, how have y'all seen the diversity space kind of grow to include more communities into the conversation? I know, Larry, you were talking about disabilities. That's a new group, or not a new group, but a more talked about group whenever the discussion of diversity is happening. How has that changed since you know, maybe have started in your position, or just even when you started getting involved with the discussion of diversity?
Sure. Well, you know, I've been at the university now coming up on 20 years. So I've seen a dramatic change in how people with disabilities have been approached and treated here at the university over those years, to a point where it was something that was very difficult for them to even talk about at one time, to now where it's more of a something that's embraced and supported with the understanding that the definition I think we've looked at has changed, and that we no longer look at these as disabled people, but they're persons with disabilities. In this kind of approach that we've really been focused on, and I do in my own personal life, is the disability does not define you. The disability is just one part of you. And I think it's a lot like Cory was saying, you know, there's, you know, we could talk about diversity all day and not talk about race or gender. You know, because as I tell people, disabilities, they don't discriminate. It's the one area, it does not care about your gender. It does not care about your religion. It doesn't care about your race. It doesn't care about your socioeconomic status. It affects us all equally. And so that's why I feel very fortunate to work in this area and see how the perception of a diverse population within the disability area has grown and really embraced it. I think just in the last 5 years, and there's several of you I know in the group listening, that if we would have told you 5 years ago that a person with autism, person on the autism spectrum, would be a vibrant, active participant in the college environment, successful at that, we probably would have questioned you about that. But it's so nice to see that people with a very wide range, a diverse group of students with all kinds of disabilities are actively participating, I think, in the college environment. Again, because they don't define themselves by the disability. They define themselves as a person that has a disability that is just one part of their overall person. And so I've seen a dramatic change in that, and it's a great change to see as well.
For myself, having worked at 2 prior institutions before coming to Tech, I think over the course of the work that I've been doing in my professional career, it's really understanding that, and I think what Larry was speaking to is that, you know, these are not singular issues, right? That there are intersecting and multiple identities that create barriers, challenges, as well as the differences. And so how does that impact my life on a day-to-day basis? And really that person first language, I think is critical to understanding, you know, what are those intersections within my life that may have me view and experience everyday normal things, right? As maybe different, or I may have to do things a different way. And I think what's really important is moving beyond diversity. And so there was a great article by Dr. D.L. Stewart about the language of appeasement. And so hiding behind diversity to say, and using it as a checkbox to say, oh, we've done this, we have this person, we have this person, we have this person, and really moving beyond that to start looking at what do we mean by inclusion, and who is at the table, not just, okay, this person, check, 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 but then whose voices are being heard. And really, I think what we're looking at now is moving towards justice and equity. And so not only who's at the table and who's getting heard, who is at fear of erasure, who is not still present or may have challenges from even getting into the room where the conversation is happening. And I think that's what we've seen throughout kind of DEI work, is not just hiding behind diversity to say, oh, we're diverse and that's it and we're good and a round of applause, but pushing that movement forward of who are we centering, who is the most marginalized person that we're centering, and how are we speaking to those needs. And again, the work I'm doing with students is how are we intentionally serving students from these many intersecting identities in culturally relevant ways to disrupt normative patterns of behavior and how we've done our work because of the diversity that we have. Is that what we've done before is not into the next 5, 10 years, and even what we're doing now is not going to be relevant in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so that constant advancement and innovation and thinking about inclusion, thinking about access, thinking about universal design, equity, and justice is extremely important. And so I definitely recommend folks checking out that article, Language of Appeasement.
I think the change has been, as Jade spoke about, it is compounding. Like, it continues to grow and to grow. I remember being a student being a freshman on campus. And although the university population has always been diverse, the acceptance and the feeling of welcome has not always been that way. And so from my arrival here in the late 80s, and then being here as an employee for over 20 years, working in the first diversity office of the system, and then now the university, and being able to watch the changes in not just the students, but our climate as a whole. And I think it's reflective of the growth that is happening across the country. And I can very vividly remember as a kid when Jesse Jackson announced he was running for president, and everyone thinking, right, a Black man will be president one day, right? And then living to see that take place in my life. And then just a few short years later, being able to see the first woman of color, the first woman being elected to a vice, like that's huge. And so I think, without making this political, just using that as an example of how the things have changed and how we must likewise change. And so the work that each of us does individually and collectively is important, as Jade said, to set a new standard and to open new doors for that which is coming inevitably, right? Like it or not, it's coming. And so we must do what we can to position ourselves and those that we encounter for those changes.
Thank you. Hey, I guess one thing that I've noticed that is huge over the past 20 years in my professional career has been now folks are not only allowed in the door now and allowed in the organization, but now allowed a voice, and not just a voice, but their uniqueness is allowed to be visible and be heard and be a part of the active conversation to change the way in which our organizations operate. So that would be the major thing that I have seen. Again, I talked about that melting pot thing that I think is, it's not a bad thing to all be American, but I think it's a bad thing if we just make everybody into one mold. And so the fact that differences are allowed to emerge now, I think, is the biggest difference I've seen over my career, and certainly something that I think is very positive and beneficial to moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this conversation is growing. It is a always changing thing. And I think that everyone, what you had to contribute is true. It's very much true. And kind of just going off of that, this is actually a question that we had submitted to us, is that because we are also, like, the conversation around diversity is growing and many more groups are being represented, how can we use more inclusive language within our everyday use? How can we go about addressing, I guess, different communities, different groups, to make sure that we are being understanding and that we are being inclusive and saying, like, we see you for who you are. We're not trying to put you in any box. We're not trying to ignore you or overlook you. So a lot of people sometimes want to know, like, how do we go about addressing that? And how do we do it in a way that's not offensive, but it's understanding?
I could answer that first. I think words are powerful, and being able to admit that you don't know is the first step. Like, I've been asked, do you want to be called Black or African American? Right? There are some people who feel adamantly about it, and I think being able to adapt and listen and learn, and to specifically ask questions when you don't know, from the angle of I'm genuinely and authentically attempting to be inclusive. I'm purposeful. You have to be thoughtful. It's no different than if, a quick story, I had a cookout. I love to grill. I had a cookout, and one of my god sisters, my godparents came from out of town, and they brought with them a young lady who was a vegetarian. Well, I don't know what you're supposed to do for that, right? Because in Texas, we're carnivores, right? That's my thought. And so I literally had to educate myself because I did not want her not to have a good experience. And so I took it upon myself to ask, one, what do you prefer? What do you do? And then to really be intentional and be sensitive to make sure that she had the same type of experience as someone else. And I think if we approach it from that perspective, right, what can I do to ensure that I cause no harm, that I learn and I grow, and that this person feels like they not only have a seat, they're not just in the room, but they have a seat at the table, like they have a purpose and they have something that they can contribute and enjoy it as well. So I think it's being intentional and asking the right questions and being sensitive.
I would, respond to that, Cory. I think that's a great example, and I think from my perspective, especially from the disability approach, to be inclusive when we talk about that, is that when we design programs, we need to think about how is this going to work for everybody, not just most of us, but how's it going to work for all of us? Several years ago, fortunately, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, they came up with a set of guidelines on how we design our buildings. We start building our buildings now so that every person that might ever need to get into that building can do so. We put ADA ramps in, we put electric switches in at least one door. We create a situation where somebody that may down the road need to get in and use that building can do so. We don't wait until a person in a wheelchair rolls up and says, I can't get in this door, what do we do? We're proactive, we're inclusive. We think about that from the beginning. One of the most difficult challenges we have on campus right now is helping faculty to understand that we have to take that same approach with our classrooms. When we're designing a class, a course, how do we make sure that everybody that could possibly be taking that course has full access to it? That comes up with the ideas of captioning videos before we even put them up. Don't wait for somebody to have to ask for it. We shouldn't be at that point. We should be thinking, how can we include everyone in this course? So those kinds of things I think are important to keep in mind, is just the approach of don't go back and try to fix something after we go forward, but let's think before we start, how are we going to make sure that everybody can be included in this course that wants to participate in that?
I think for me, everything I do really, I am an educator. And so for me personally, I always assume good intent. Again, that's my job, is to educate folks as a part of my role. That may not necessarily be everybody. And so as Cory mentioned, coming in with good intent and being genuine and asking the question and acknowledging when you don't know. I think part of that is also, doing some critical self-reflection. What privileges do I hold on a day-to-day basis? What are things that I may take for granted? How does that shape my experience? And then what don't I know? And I think having that, there's a lot I still don't know. And I'm constantly learning every single day, right? And as new, Cory mentioned this, as we're expanding diversity, right? What don't I know? How do I go and find out? And taking an active initiative to engage. I think the great thing with technology is that there is a plethora of information out on the web. And if you have access, to be able to go and discover that, I think that's a great way to start, to come to folks that are in an educator role to ask, hey, I know this is the work that you do. Where do I get started? And I know that's been a lot of inquiries that we've gotten over the past couple of years since I've been here of, I don't even know where to get started. How do I even start? Because I want to do better. And I think for me, people that want to do better and to learn and to grow, that's exciting. And that's really what makes our campus community more inclusive. It's also recognizing you're going to step in it. And there's going to be times that you're going to say the wrong thing. And the best thing that you can do in that moment is to apologize, right? Especially if you're called out or called in at those moments, is to recognize that I don't know everything and apologize for that. And I think that's important, is that we forget the apology piece and instead want to get really defensive. And also understand your apology in that moment may not be accepted, but that is the thing to do. My girl Ava Longoria just did that a couple of days ago. So you're going to step in it, and it's to have the humility in order to apologize when you do. And I think that can go a long way. And just learning to do that, I think, is really important, but also growing and wanting to learn more.
You know, for me, thank you for that, and that's great, and I try and do that all the time. And again, that for me, I think it's mutual respect. You know, I think we're all probably calling things a little bit differently, but you know, the word that comes to my mind is mutual respect. I understand that you know, we're going to respect each other, and you can tell me if there's something you'd like me to correct. I'm going to give you that decency as just a fellow human being. You know, we're going to celebrate differences, and we're going to give each other mutual respect, and ultimately that kind of comes down to developing our own cultural competency, if you will, and just developing our ability to effectively interact with another person. You know, I'm going to come at it with the best intention and with open mind and an open heart, and I hope that everybody has that same perspective. I think if we do that, along with all the other things that have just been mentioned, we're going to be a lot better off as a human race, and certainly as an organization. And all of that's very important, because ultimately, you know, that's the why, isn't it? Isn't that why we're here? We're here to serve other people. And if we're doing these things and we're being open-minded, we can better serve the students that are here and our coworkers.
Yes, Aaron, you hit on something very important. I mean, we are here to serve others. I think most of the time people, because we are a university, their first thought is we're here to serve the students. And then probably from that, they go into faculty, and then they go to staff. And of course, we're here for Staff Senate. And so everything that you just said about trying to have that inclusive language, the main theme that I was getting from that is educating. Like, everyone is about educating themselves and asking the right questions, making sure that they know, or that they try to do as much work as they can to know how to address the situation, a person, and group, whatever it may be. And so along with that, because you all hold a pretty important title in your positions, so what are some of the things that are going on, or that you do to try to implement that in a workspace? Because a lot of people are being, you know, they want to be their authentic selves coming into work. How do y'all promote that? How do y'all support that? How do you inspire your people to do that in a staff point of view?
I can start. Or Cory, you go ahead. I've been talking a lot. So go. I think one of the things, and I want to acknowledge in the chat, Susie positioning, and this relates to the work that I do as a supervisor, and being able to work with our own directors as they're supervising their teams, is understanding, right? We have varying perspectives. Age is one of those. Generation, we laugh all the time when folks are talking about students and they're calling them millennials. They're no longer millennials. I'm actually a millennial, so I joke because I'm at the upper level of a millennial. And so it's also recognizing, right, a monolithic, when we think about certain groups and we are categorizing folks as a millennial or Gen this and Gen that, is that we're not taking into account, you know, I am an older millennial, and so my experience is going to be different. I may, you know, fit into that mold, and I may not. And so we've, you know, Aaron talked a lot about, you know, this idea of a meld. And I have a colleague that talked about, you know, building a salad, right? What is your awesome salad? And everybody, the tomatoes still going to be tomatoes, but they're in the salad together. Lettuce gets to be lettuce. Croutons going to be croutons, right? And so as a supervisor, for me, it's really important that I disrupt this idea of normative professionalism. You know, even as I'm interviewing myself, is being able to come in with curly hair, which, you know, I was told very early in my career that I should straighten my hair for interviews because it would be seen as a cleaner, that it would be more professional. And so I purposely ensure that I'm modeling certain behaviors. So how are we creating this a humanizing experience? Not telling our staff that your family life and things that are happening outside of work don't matter, because they do. I've been able to do that. I think also, you know, obviously the work that we're doing, we're talking about some topics. This last summer, we held space to talk about the harm and murder of Black bodies and how, as staff, we were coping and what we were experiencing. And so creating that time and the energy to be able to do that, to also disrupt, I know depending on where you're from, tattoos don't bother me. I came from Phoenix, so everybody there, we have a whole sleeve of tattoos. So even how we think about and define professionalism to me is allowing, us to disrupt some of those normative standards of what you need in order to be professional. And for me, I'm really looking at is how are we best serving our students, our colleagues? How are we being good colleagues? What does that mean? And how do we humanize that experience? Again, we're not robots, we're working with humans. So to expect that we're not going to show up and we can't be our authentic selves means we're doing a disservice to those that we serve.
I think it's so important, as Jay was talking, to let everyone be their authentic selves. But I think that first originates with the acceptance and appreciations of your own complexities, your the fact that you're multidimensional, right? That exists within you. And then, as I enjoy a myriad of things, foods, music, hobbies, activities, I bring myself to all that I do at all points, right? That doesn't mean that I get to show them all at the same time, but they're all there. And so all I am will at some point manifest. And I think being able to give those that we work with that opportunity, especially as our state is becoming much more diverse, that, Texas will soon be a minority majority state. And so the students that came to Tech with me look completely different in the way they went to school, the way they approached it, everything was totally different. And so, Larry and I have been here long enough to remember when there were no cell phones on campus, right? And so everyone had an actual phone in their bed, in the room, like an actual phone, like you actually had to dial a number. You couldn't just say Siri call, right? So realizing things are changing and that those that come into interface with us, not just our students and our faculty and our staff, but our community, right? And working with community, being able to work with the different pockets and showing an appreciation. So all the things that we do within the division and as what we do across the campus to celebrate cultures, as Jade started this off by acknowledging the land that we are on, right? Just acknowledging that this has not always been the place that was always that is as welcoming. And then making sure, as Larry talked about, that when you're here, what's your experience? And so when you walk into my office, you can tell that I like music because all of the stuff on my wall reflects jazz. That's like who I am. And at one point I felt it necessary to kind of fit the tech, everything's a double T and all that. And I love the double T, but this is my office and this is where I work. And so I need that vibe. And so I think what Jay was speaking of is still there's a level of excellence and still a level of professionalism that we have, but allowing people to do it through their own complexities, through their own individualities, that brings a richness because there's someone coming in the door who's going to associate or affiliate or really have an affinity with that would not necessarily with just having a double T, right? And so understanding that we have this great emergence, I say this and I'll shut up, that I really believe that this is probably the most diverse environment that the majority of our students, faculty, and staff will ever be in at one time, because you can interface with people from all over the world. And as such, we miss golden opportunities to grow if we try to make everyone conform to one particular style, one particular expression.
Cory, I think that leads right into what I was going to talk about. And I think that the idea of the way our student population looks now is so different than what it has been in the past. It's much more inclusive. And one of the things that I do to help, try to help faculty, my staff, it's easy for them to be motivated. They see the challenges every single day that these students face with their particular disability and in the classroom. But one of the things that really helps me kind of help faculty understand this new diversity and this new population is to help them focus on the positive part of it. And so one of the things that we talk about with them is, I know sometimes it may be frustrating for you to have to caption your video, take the time to do that, or it may take time for you to put up notes on the board or anything like that. But you have to understand that, yes, our population does look different. It's not things we used to do. But when you do these things, you are creating a much more rich learning environment for every one of those students. Because as I will explain to them, when you caption a video, yes, a student that has a hearing impairment has to have that to have access to the information. They just do. But you have to understand that probably 75% of the students in that class are also going to take advantage of the closed caption because they're better visual learners. They're much more effective when they hear and see at the same time. So yes, you're addressing one particular piece of our new population, but you're benefiting everyone. And so when you look at it like that, it should motivate them to want to do more because you're creating a much more wholesome and complete learning environment, including those. I know one of our panelists or one of our attendees was talking about age diversity. And that's a huge part of what I do because a lot of the students coming back in our disability services program that use our services are non-traditional students, students that are much older that have acquired disabilities later in life. They've lost hearing at a later age. They don't use sign language interpreters because they don't speak that language. So they have to have other kinds of accommodations. But those kinds of accommodations then greatly enhance the environment for everybody. So that's how I try to approach faculty to stay positive and don't look at accommodations as a chore or as something, but look at it as a way to really enhance what you're already doing for the learning environment. So.
I think my big takeaway from all of this was I love that authentic self. So, you know, when I'm looking at people to surround myself with from a professional perspective, I do like to seek out people that are different from me. I like to seek out employees that make me question, make me think, make me uncomfortable, make me develop, and ultimately make me into a better person that help me to be a better leader. So that we can, again, go back to serving a community, a college, a campus, and staff, and all of those folks that we can serve them better by mirroring them. And so if we look like the people we're serving, then we're doing ourselves, I think, a tremendous service. So I love that authentic selves, letting people be themselves. Again, not putting them into a mold, letting them show their diversity, letting them show their uniqueness. And again, I think that just makes us all a better team. But thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. So yes, following up from this, I mean, we've talked about terms, languages to use to have these conversations. We just got done talking about authentic self and how y'all are letting that happen in your own office and how we can have that happen across other places. One of the questions that we got from a staff member is, and I'm going to make this into a two-part question, so hopefully I don't get anyone lost, is are there any plans to engage all staff departments in diversity discussions and implementation across across the university? So that's part of it. And one thing that I can answer to that's part of why our series has started, Red Talk, because we're going to help hopefully guide those conversations and to bring up those conversations. So we want to hear from staff members. So if you're listening, please let us know what you want to talk about. But where my second part of this question comes in is, how can staff members go to supervisors or maybe other people in their department who are leadership and start these conversations and have these conversations in a way that is, one, educational, two, respectful, because that's what we need, understanding, respectness, but also in a way that doesn't bring any potential, how do I want to phrase this, repercussions, I guess. So like, what would be the best way that these people can go back to their departments from these discussions and have those and make sure that they can get something started the best way possible?
So I'd say it probably starts, for instance, in my department with me, right? It starts with me having an open door and an open mind and making a comfortable place for anybody that reports to me to be able to come to me with any problem or any issue. So I think that's really where it starts. So that's what I would say. I think that's something I've always tried to work toward, is to have that open door policy, that they could bring any issue to me. But not only is it okay, that's just part of it, right? Then the other part of it is actually doing something about it. And so knowing that they can trust to come to me, but also trust that I can actually do something about it as well. There's got to be some action on the other side of that. And then, of course, I make sure that all those supervisors that report to me also have that same attitude and that same accountability.
And I think I really appreciate what you said with it starting with you. I think it starts at the top. Leadership sets the standard, they set the tone. Being sensitive and aware of the various issues that are going on. As Jade spoke of when things were kind of boiling over earlier in the year, it was being proactive and saying, okay, people are feeling a certain way, giving them an opportunity just to vent, right? And just to answer or to express their concerns and frustration, being sensitive that everyone does not necessarily feel the same way you feel about it, that we can too watch the same thing and get a different perspective, but being open and honest and having a space where, again, people can bring their authentic selves and say, to me, this hurts. And having an appreciation and an understanding that all oppression hurts. And I don't necessarily have to have been, shot to empathize that, it probably doesn't feel great, right? And knowing your privilege, right? To be able to walk around with no visible or known disabilities is one thing, but being sensitive to the fact that there are others who may have some difficulty climbing some stairs, and by design, being intentional. As I think really the word intentionality is what comes to my mind, is that in the way we program, in the way that we approach our colleagues and the work situations, do you feel okay? How are you? And not just ask that question we ask as we're passing people, right? How you doing? We don't really mean like, we don't, because try it one time, just stop and start telling people like, well, today my back hurts. And they'll be like, what? Because they don't expect that. When you create a space for people to genuinely be heard, they have an invested interest, and then they will tell you often how you can be a partner in creating an environment or creating the change or a forum for them to have those discussions.
I think, earlier in my career, diversity, equity, inclusion wasn't written into my job description. And so those would be things that I would take to my supervisor to say, I want to help lead what we're doing in this area. And then, that really is what got me started in the field. But it was also my supervisor saying, this is not just something you should be doing, we should all be doing it. And so sometimes it's also recognition of like listening to your staff when they're saying things. And on the flip side, knowing that the culture in the unit may not be the place where they feel comfortable saying those things. And so being cognizant of what kind of culture am I creating in the work environment that creates open and honest dialogue, and am I as a supervisor being receptive to that? And I think that is extremely important. It's creating those spaces. Some of the things I've done is, in our directors meeting, when I know that there are things outside the university that are happening nationally, globally, is, being more intentional about taking the time at the beginning of that meeting, because it's on everybody's mind. The business stuff, it will get done, and I trust my team to do that, but sometimes we have to take care of each other and self first before we can even start thinking about the business. And so I think that's been beneficial. I think it's really reevaluating what are the values of the unit. It's also aligning as part of the mission of the institution. Diversity is written into our strategic plan. And so if you are somebody that is wanting to have this conversation, tie it back in with the goals of the institution and the mission of the institution, as well as your unit and your department, I would not think that somebody's going to be able to say no to that, because it literally is in the fabric of our institution. So being able to utilize that and leverage that as a way to not just say we're doing this or say diversity, but move towards action and creating a plan to be able to do that. In terms of, what else can happen, there are plans. we're actually working on a DDEI dialogue series with a couple of faculty members that we're hoping to launch in the spring to continue conversations around different topics. And so the first one we're hoping to be able to do in talking about, you know, understanding race and what does that mean, and then hoping to move on. And so there will be things that will be coming out of both areas, but then also working with human resources. We just partnered to do a microaggressions training with HR. And so that was exciting. We're also working on a book club discussion and collaboration that we're hoping to have in the spring. And so there's continuous things happening. And I think one of the things we're working on is where we can start to build out a resource list on our website.
I think so. Just I certainly echo what the others have said about creating a positive environment, a safe environment for people to be able to speak. We talk often about the importance of being able to defend those being attacked when those being attacked are not able to defend themselves or even there to defend themselves. And that it's easy to let that happen, and you have to empower your staff to feel safe to do that so that they can speak up, you know, and not in a challenging way, but when they're hearing someone talk negatively, let's say, for example, about someone with a particular type of disability, try to change the focus of that and make sure they understand, well, there are some very positive aspects to that person. Shift it. Don't let it, you know, go. But it's too easy to let things go if someone's talking in a negative way about someone where there's no repercussion for that. But you've got to empower your staff to feel safe in that environment, and knowing that they can speak up on behalf of those that sometimes maybe are not able to speak up for themselves.
Thank you all. It's really encouraging and kind of relieving to hear members of leadership, you know, say these things, and to hear that, you know, it starts at the top, makes the way down, because I feel like that's something that we do here, is that it's got to start from the top and trickle down into the other departments. And I know that it's sometimes hard as people who don't have, you know, title of director or supervisor, things like that, to have those conversations. And this question, I want to get it addressed, and I think it's going to be our last question. So hopefully we can turn this question around and have a positive end to this. Is so someone has encountered, once they brought up an injustice or spoke up against something, and they had backlash, and there was retaliation and even demotion. So how can we change that environment when leadership is creating this behavior for those who may not have that power and don't have maybe an understanding supervisor? And I think that this can go even outside of Texas Tech.
I think one of the things, you know, and again, I'm sorry to hear that maybe has happened to somebody, because, you know, I don't expect that would be something from the leadership team at the university that they would promote that's happening. And so I'm really sorry that has happened. I think one of the things that I've been looking at, and we've been, you know, kind of talking about, is we don't have a supervisory development program here. That was something, as, you know, that was critical as a younger professional that I had at a prior institution, that helped me understand, you know, what does it mean to be a supervisor? Oftentimes, you know, we learn how to be a supervisor because we've seen really great supervisors, or we've seen really bad supervisors, and you're like, nope, that's not what I want to be, so I'm going to do the exact opposite. And so there is intentionality behind that. I think it's also leveraging your peers, your colleagues across campus. If it's something, you know, discriminatory, and again, it's being able to work with EEO. And again, I don't know the situation, but knowing your resources and what avenues you can take, because there are certain things that are protected. And again, not knowing the situation, making sure that you're reaching out to HR and EEO for any of those things. But in terms of just general, you know, this was brought to my attention again, being able to have those supporters. I saw somebody else in the chat talking about, you know, having the space and not feeling so alone. It can be lonely. And so reaching out to those on campus, I'm always happy to meet with folks. I may not have all the answers, but to help, you know, create a strategy about how you can do this. I think that's part of our work that we do in both the division and OID.
knowing that there are people who care and who are committed, and that you have to find that. And you may not have that in your department, you may not have that in your unit. You would hope so, but if it's not, it doesn't mean that it's not in the university, right? And so, as Jade articulated, there are these opportunities and there are offices that are specifically charged with addressing things that are discriminatory or so forth. I think it's also for everyone else, right? How can you be a partner? How can you, like, nobody is necessarily looking for a savior, right? We just need you to be a co-conspirator. Like, get engaged with the fight, right? If all oppression hurts and you have an opportunity to address it, you can speak up for those who, as Larry said, may not be able to speak for themselves, or for those who may feel disenfranchised. Knowing that you do have a support network, that there are organizations and a myriad of opportunities within the institution and within the community where you can find folk who will help champion your cause and make sure that you feel and know that you're valued. And you can be a change agent. So a lot of the opportunities that are now available for all of us are the results of others who, it wasn't there for them and they said, this has to change. And so they were brave enough to get in the fight. And so sometimes it means getting your hands dirty and being a co-conspirator or being the champion for yourself, right? No one can champion my cause like me. I'm all I got, so I'm going out for it. And I have a new puppy, and he lets us know what he wants, right? He is a champion for himself. And I look at him, I was like, man, I need to have that kind of courage in my life, that if something's not right, I don't like it, I need to let you know. And I think that's how we have to move to positively change
it. Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron. I really don't have anything to add to that. I mean, it is important to find safe places to go and safe places to go and talk to people. I think you certainly see now there's 4 different individuals right here in front of you that you could certainly feel safe going and talking about if you had a situation, because I had that happen on occasion where someone from another department will come and visit with me just about the proper way to approach another supervisor. Have I experienced with them? What would they recommend I do? So always feel free that you can do that, especially from these 4 folks right here.
That was what I was going to say as well. You know, a couple things were mentioned. I heard EEO, HR, staff senate, me, and you know, so I'm somebody that that individual could come to as well, even though you're not in my department. That wouldn't matter. My name's Aaron Smith, and I'm probably pretty easy to find. So, you know, there's that, and that's all I'd say. Just know your outlet, know your paths, and understand they're there, and there's a lot of people here that are willing to help you out. And also know, you know, and of course, I would always recommend first have a conversation. But if that conversation is a dead end, or there's no way around it, and you see no outlet, then there are outlets. Again, EEO, HR, staff senate, just as an example. And again, I think the 4 people, I won't speak for everybody here, but I think that's probably true, that anybody here would be more than willing to listen to you and offer you a safe space.
Yes, thank y'all. I mean, you definitely hit on a lot of things. Yes, knowing your resources, knowing where to go, especially when those conversations arise, it's a hard thing, but they are there. And knowing that there are individuals like the 4 of you who are here to reach out to, as well as us, the staff senate, we're here and we're here to serve you, especially the DE&I committee. We want to hear from you. So, I mean, always feel free to reach out, because there are those resources out there, and there are those groups of people and individuals. And so I'm glad that y'all said that, and that you all feel strongly about being able to have that conversation and be open to hearing from those who may have a hard time. I really wish that this conversation could go on. I feel like we barely scraped the surface, and there's so much more we could talk about, and we may have to plan for longer than an hour. I don't know. We're gonna have to see. But I do want to thank you all for being here, to our panelists. If we were in a group setting, I would have everyone clap. So just know that we're all virtually clapping for you. And just to let other people know that we are going to be having this Red Talk discussion series. We're going to be hitting a lot of other topics. I'm writing notes like as we were going through of things that we could talk about in the future. So please feel free to let us know of anything else. And real quick, also, because we talked about it, this discussion is going to be available to people with closed captioning and also translated into Spanish. We got y'all. We heard you. We're going to do it. But does any panelist have any last words that they want to leave on? I'll let you speak real quick.
Thank you all for being present today. I think this is a start, right? And it's continued. So thank you all for making our university a wonderful place and a place where I can call and say that I have amazing colleagues, and it really truly is a pleasure to be on campus.
Yes. I'd echo that and invite anyone, if you want to continue these conversations individually, I'd be more than happy to meet with any of you.
You have a voice, and one of the things that I think is so important is that it's about unifying, right? It's about uniting the uniqueness that we each bring to the table. And so you are a part of the process. You're a part of the change. And as was already stated, I'm certainly willing to have any kind of conversations and do what I can to advance the causes as warranted. Thank you.
Just thank you very much for the opportunity to talk, and it's great to meet you all again. I'm relatively new here at Texas Tech, so it's just fantastic to get to see faces and names and kind of understand your part here at the university, so that again, we can work together and build a better community and build a better university.
Thank you all again, Jade, Cory, Larry, Aaron. We will definitely be reaching out to you again for future discussions because it's been great. You all had so much valuable information for not only our attendees, but also those of us on Staff Senate and the DE&I committee running this. So thank you. I'm sure that this won't be our last time, hopefully, if you want to come back. But thank you again to everyone. We're not going to take up any more of your time. Be on the lookout for more discussion series that are going to be coming up. Like I said, this is going to be available in a closed captioning format as well as a Spanish format. And we will also have it in a podcast that's soon to come. So we look forward to seeing y'all. You all have a great day.